For some of you, this will be your very first time hunting elk, and I'm sure you have lots of questions. In this video, we're going to do our best to get you ready to hunt elk in Kentucky. But first up, let's take a look at the herd here. In the mid-1990s, reclaimed mine lands in eastern Kentucky provided the perfect habitat for restoring elk. In 1997, thousands of Kentuckians gathered as 7 Rocky Mountain elk from Kansas were released into Kentucky's coal fields.
Y'all are right.
Over the next 5 years, more releases would follow, and in 2001, Kentucky held its first quota hunt, and in 2006, the healthy herd was producing Boone and Crockett elk. Today, Kentucky's estimated elk population is around 10,000. Now that's the biggest herd in the East. Let's take a look at the animal itself. A Kentucky adult elk can range from 500 to 600 pounds for a female and up to 1,000 pounds for a bull prior to mating season. Kentucky bulls typically reach their maximum antler growth at around 8 years. Their diet includes grasses, forbs, and they do plenty of browsing for food such as hard mast. If you watch elk in the wild, typically you'll see a large male, a dominant male, who will round up as many cows as he can possibly take care of. In Kentucky, we have really mild winters compared to their range out west. So that means they don't have to travel nearly as far to find food. If they're in an area where they have plenty to eat, they tend to stay in a particular area. Another difference in the East is that the elk have very few natural predators. In Kentucky, their rut or mating season usually begins in late September, and the peak of calving season is around the 1st of June. And now that you're a little more familiar with Kentucky's elk, let's get you ready to hunt. More than anything, scouting is very, very important. Find your area, find out where you're supposed to hunt. Take a trip down there way early. Get to know the area, get to know the locals, get to know your guide if you choose to use one. Find out where they're bedding, where they're eating, and know that as it gets hotter or colder through the season, things tend to change a bit. You know, hunting out west has got some brutal terrain, some big mountains, big trees, and these elk can move way up or down. In Kentucky, I find that these animals, if they have what they need as far as food, they'll stay in a certain area. So if you scout and you continue to do your homework, it's more than likely these animals that you're looking at will still be there on opening morning. And it's a very good idea to get there way ahead of time, plan so you can do that research and be prepared when the time comes, because you're not sure if somebody's going to be on that property there as well. Choosing your weapon and being proficient with it is the most important part of this game. You need to shoot at different yardages. Now, elk many times can be seen from great yardages. So if you can possibly shoot up to a couple hundred yards, that's to your advantage. Now this may sound very basic, but this goes for archery as well as rifle. Know your ammunition, know your arrow. Many times a lot of people grab an arrow and, well, it's this grain and this arrow's this grain. I'm using different broadheads. Obviously you need to shoot the same sort of thing over and over, make sure you've got the same weight arrows, same weight heads. As far as your ammunition, practice, use the same ammunition that you use on the range. Be very proficient. Obviously, when you're on rough terrain, you don't know whether you're going to have to lay down, hide behind a tree. You should practice in a prone position, kneeling, whatever you have to do. And you might want to carry a set of sticks with you. Get real good at having a set of sticks with you because you may need that. Again, you're up and down mountains. You may be in a situation where you don't have very much time to fire. Every position that you can possibly comfortably shoot in, I would try that. Now, choosing archery equipment, you need to check your guides and make sure that you're shooting enough poundage. And remember, these are big animals and it can take a whole lot of punishment. Now, archery is a very effective way to kill big game, but you need to look at your broadheads. You need to make sure that you've got sufficient poundage on your bow for penetration and sufficient weight of your arrow. It's very important. Research this carefully. Shoot at a distance that you're comfortable with. Don't try to overdo it. Know that these are big animals, and a lot of times if you're judging distance, that will change when you see a big animal as compared to a smaller deer. So practice, practice, practice. Don't take a shot that you wouldn't take on a deer. Now again, an elk is a big animal. If you have deer hunted, it's a totally different creature. Make sure you know where the vital areas are, so when you make that shot, you owe it to yourself, you owe it to the animal. Put the animal down quickly with as little suffering as possible. Now I'm going to stress, you may have to shoot 1, 2, 3, 4, or multiple shots into that animal to bring it down. The better shot you take, the less tracking you will have to do. All right, let's talk about equipment. Your equipment is fairly basic as far as hunting itself. Obviously, you need to break up your pattern. Any sort of camouflage will do. Elk, they are herd animals though. There are many sets of eyes, many sets of ears, and many noses, so you have to deal with that. So the best thing you can do at any given time is pay attention to what the wind is doing. Use a wind indicator. Know where the wind is coming from. Listen to your weather report and make sure that you know what's going on weather-wise. You need a good pair of glasses. You need a good pair of binoculars. The terrain in southeastern Kentucky is very hilly. You can be on a mountain one minute, on a flat area in another, and you may be looking over several thousands of feet. So be prepared to do a lot of scouting, a lot of glassing. Rangefinders are very important. They're not as expensive as they used to be. There's many good brands on the market. You need to know your yardage. You need to be practiced up to 300-400 yards if you're capable of shooting those ranges and you know what your gun is good at. Many times you can get within 100-200 yards of an elk. Archery hunting, if you play the wind and if you really pay attention to your scent and you're very quiet, you can get within effective shooting range of an elk. Very easily get within 50, 40, 30 yards, even closer if you play things right and you go really slow and you watch your sound and you remain as scent neutral as possible. In being scent neutral, there are many things you can do. There's non-scent soaps that you can bathe in the morning, and I would recommend that you do that every morning. If you can, every time before you go out, wipe the oil, wipe the sweat off your body, and get as scent-free as you can. There are also sprays, non-scent sprays, where you can spray each other down. You're probably going to be hunting with somebody. Make sure that you spray off as best you can and remain as scent neutral as possible. This is very important. They do have good noses, and again, you're hunting groups of animals. If one smells you and they take off, they're all gone. I've had the privilege over the last 12 years to do a lot of guiding in Kentucky for elk, and you learn every time you go out. You learn from your mistakes. I hunted out west before that. But one thing that you know about elk is they are very vocal, especially during the rut, and that begins in September. Now, it's amazing the sounds these animals make. A 500-pound cow will make a sound similar to this. It sounds more like a bird. This is more of a diaphragm call. This is a simple push call that you can buy just about anywhere. These are cow calls. This mimics the sound of a cow, and they make many different noises. They have estrus calls. They have sounds that they make when they're alarmed, when they are just traveling along and saying, hey, where is everybody? So kind of listen to tapes. There are plenty of tapes out there that show you these sounds, how to make them, what they mean. And many times a cow will get separated from a group and she'll want to get back in and she'll make that sound, or a calf will make that noise. Now there are many different folks who have a million different ideas on calling. Now when it comes to bull calling, many times these animals have heard a lot of folks out there making a lot of noise, and they can become call shy just like a turkey. But the general sound of an elk bugling is this. Nothing fancy, just one little note to see if you can get a response. Now sometimes that will make that herd bull angry, and sometimes he'll come charging in, and I've had that situation happen. That's the best case scenario. A lot of times you'll hear nothing, or you'll hear a response, and elk will move out. A lot of times they're wondering if it might be somebody that want to take their cows, and he'll move them out. So many different things can happen with a bull call. I use it sparingly. Now if you have a charged up bull that's coming towards you, and you want to continue to use that, and be careful, these animals can be aggressive. Some calls that most people don't talk about or know about are very subtle things. If you have a bull working in and you think you might need that last little bit to get him in, pick up a big stick and just thrash against the limbs. Make a thrashing noise in the leaves, because a lot of times old bull, out of frustration, will take a tree and just tear it up. And if he hears that and he's already aggressive, and here's another bull doing that, and you can't see him, he's in the tree line, and you need to pull him out another 50 yards, another 100 yards, try this sort of thing with an occasional cow call and see if that can bring him on in. And use your cow call sparingly too. And that, best case scenario, he thinks there's a lost cow out there who's out of his realm and he wants to bring her back in. He may come to that sound and may call and try to coax her back. So these things can work, and you have to judge every situation differently and hope for the best. Cow hunting versus bull hunting. Now whether you get drawn for a cow or a bull tag, hey, congratulations. Best meat in the world. Now cow hunting, First thing you got to do is you got to find them. It's not so much of a call situation. You just have to find the animal. You have to do all the same things as far as pay attention to your scent, pay attention to the wind. You can sneak up on these animals and get within shooting range, rifle or archery. Now bulls, we talked about the calling situation. Sometimes you don't need to call. And I highly recommend if you have a very vocal bull and he's the animal you're hunting, and you can get to him, don't bother to call. Don't use your call at all. Don't think because you're out there on the mountain you have to blow that call, because sometimes they can work against you. So if you have a vocal bull and that's the animal you're hunting, let him keep on sounding off and use that noise as a cover to get closer to the animal. Now let's talk about safety in the field and other hunters. Now most of safety is common sense. Obviously, look at the regs, make sure you've got your hunter orange. And as we draw more and more tags, as more and more people are out in the field hunting elk, you really have to be careful about your shot. Now, let me explain a scenario that might happen to you. If you're in an area, in a mountainous area, and you see other hunters come into the area, make sure that they know you're there. We've had more than one instance where we've come into the field and a hunter is hiding. He sees us, we don't see him. You have to be cautious of this sort of thing. Also know that when you shoot, even when you shoot through the animal, that bullet can sometimes travel, up to distances of a couple hundred yards. We have footage here of an animal that was shot from a couple hundred yards. Look where this bullet ends up behind it. Not only do you have to be conscious of other hunters, but if there had been a cow standing back there or another bull, you're going to be responsible for the shot that you take. So look at this video and understand how this bullet can travel, even through a huge animal like an elk, and continue to travel. That's a big caliber bullet. Keep that in mind with other animals and other hunters as well. And keep this in mind, bull of a lifetime, standing up on a hill, he's skylined. Remember what happened when we shot that bull and you saw where the bullet came out. What if there's a hunter on the other side of that hill or another animal? You're responsible. Take your shot wisely. If you see hunters come into your area and you're hidden behind a tree and they don't see you, stand up outside of that area, wave your arms, do whatever you have to do to make that hunter aware that you're there, because cows or bulls can sneak up very quietly and you could be within the line of fire. So keep that in mind, be safe, be cautious, think about other hunters in the area and other animals, because once you pull that trigger, you can't get that bullet back. One thing you have to do at all times is be prepared, if you get that animal, to have ice to put in that body cavity once you have field dressed that animal. Have coolers full of large bags of ice that you can ice this animal down with. You don't want that meat to spoil. Make sure you have a trailer to haul this animal out on. This is not a deer. This is a huge animal. Also, make sure that you're prepared to either cut this animal up yourself and put it in the freezer when you get home, or have a processor who does this. Make sure you have a processor that's available and will cut elk up. If you're going to have this animal taken to a taxidermist, talk to your taxidermist before you go out. He'll give you great information on where you need to cut on that animal to get a good shoulder mount, which most mounts are today. Okay, in closing, keep these few things in mind. Be prepared. First and foremost, know your weapon. Practice, practice, practice. Remember that it may take multiple shots to get this big animal on the ground, regardless of what caliber you're shooting. Make sure you're proficient up to at least a couple hundred yards. With your archery equipment, practice, 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 practice. Know the size of the animal, know the vital areas. Make sure when you take that shot, you owe it to yourself, you owe it to the animal to put that down as humanely as possible, and you don't want to spoil your meat if you can help it. Do your scouting. And don't forget, it's up to you to know the regulations. You can get plenty of information from the department. You can either check out our website at fw.ky.gov or call our information center at 1-800-858-1549. Plenty of folks that can help you out in that regard, and talk to our biologists. They're more than willing to help.